as soon as I laid my hand on the doorknob, the suspect shot through with a homemade 12-gauge shotgun.
I do not know you, but I am your brother.
You do not know me, but I am your protector.
I will run into a burning building to save your life.
Though I do not know your name, I will take a bullet for you.
Though we've never met,
I believe in duty and sacrifice
of self.
Your family is my family.
Is my family. Your life is my duty.
What's going on, guys? Time for a very special episode of Behind the Uniforms. Tell them who you are.
Houston Gas.
Houston is a police chief. Now, before we dive into his story, I want to celebrate him with a 30-year-old scotch. I know you brought a bottle, but it's my turn to pour because I like to pay tribute to you. Now, Houston is up here from Texas. We are honoring him. He has been selected as the Law Enforcement Today Citizen of the Year. None of this Colin Kaepernick stuff. You are the real deal, a real hero. As a matter of fact, before you dive into your story, I've actually got some gifts, hence the big messy. Our friends over at Bottle Breacher, in celebration of you, have made you a custom bottle
cool.
breacher. So we'll show that off to you guys after. And our friends over at Inforce sent you over some lights for your guns.
Heck yeah.
Back at the station. And of course you get the official Whiskey Patriots window decal.
There we go.
So we should probably, and Momax has sent you over, so I'm sure a lot of you guys know this kid Max, 9 years old, started a company. He sent some sanitizer for your vest, some chapters, some lip balm for on the road. So now that we hooked you up with some gifts, let's talk about your story.
Absolutely.
Where do you want to start? You want to talk about a good day or about a bad day?
We can talk wherever you want to go.
Why don't we start with a good day? Tell me about a good day.
I tell you what, probably, it's been 6-7 years ago. There was a lady involved in a domestic disturbance, and she'd got the stuffings beat out of her pretty good, and we got her back to the station, and we'd sat there and talked to her, and just trying to convince her, because we'd dealt with this so many different times, and we actually got to sit there and talk to her. We probably talked for like an hour, and we finally talked her out of that house. Now, it was several years before I knew that. Little things like that, that turn into big things. You get to change people's lives in what we do. And there's nothing greater than that, I don't think.
I want to talk about a bad day now, and my guess is that you're going to share with everyone the real bad day that happened. You guys, if you've never seen this show before, the way that it works is that we invite emergency responders, veterans on to tell us the stories behind their uniforms, to tell you about a good day, tell you about a bad day, to share a cocktail and talk about the journey. It's our goal to humanize these men and women, and the reason that Houston was chosen as the Law Enforcement Today Citizen of the Year was because of the battle that he's faced, but the inspiration that he's given others. Do you want to talk about that day?
Yeah, January 6th, 2015 is a day I won't ever forget. We got called into work early that morning. We were shorthanded, and which wasn't an odd thing to get called in. So I called my wife, told her, hey, I'm not going to see you at lunch. I'm going to be going to work. And I went to work about 10:45 that morning, and as soon as I got on to work, the day shift patrol sergeant called out for extra units to come to his location because we had a domestic disturbance going on where shots had already been fired. And whenever we got over there, we made several attempts trying to contact the guy. We got the girl out. Thankfully, she was, but we made several attempts trying to get him. And then whenever we decided to make entry into the house, we searched through the house unsuccessfully until we got to the far back southwest bedroom of the residence. And the way everything was situated, there was a bed against the wall, there was a door, and then there was a couch right there. So there wasn't just a whole lot of room in there. And me and the three guys that were in there, my lieutenant was standing at the back, covering our back. The day shift sergeant, and then we had a detective. That's how shorthanded we were. We had, lieutenants and sergeants and detectives taking these calls and stuff. So we made our plan of how we were going to open this door and everything, because the door opened up to the inside. And as soon as I laid my hand on the doorknob, the suspect shot through with a homemade 12-gauge shotgun.
Jeez. He hit.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Hit me in the face. Single-handedly, probably the most pain I've ever felt in my life at any one given second. Amazingly, though, it didn't knock me out. I stayed awake the entire time that we were in the house. To the guys that were there with me in the house, I'll always be grateful for what they did, dragging me to safety and stuff. Because whenever I got hit, it knocked me on my butt, and I got knocked stupid. But then they drug me out, and my lieutenant laid on top of me. He laid me on my left side in the living room of the house, waiting for the fire department and the ambulance and stuff to get there. And amazingly, the fire department was only like a couple blocks away. They were out testing hydrants that day.
Oh, wow.
So, the ambulance service was down at one of our local restaurants getting some breakfast. So they were only like 6 blocks away whenever the call came out that an officer was down. And I tell you, you hear those words, and you always think about those other videos and things that you hear it on TV. You don't ever think about it being you. And whenever you hear those words and it's you that's the one that's down, it becomes a completely different story then. It's very surreal, very, literally your life will flash before your eyes. I mean, mine did that. Me and my wife had only been married 6 months at this point in time. So, we had our kids, and if there was ever a point in time in my life where I know God was listening to me, it was that day right there.
What happened next?
Well, I tell you what, they took me over to the helicopter pad, and they flew me to our local trauma center in Amarillo.
And at this point, is the guy still?
Yeah, he's still hung up in the house. He'd stayed barricaded in his house till, I don't know, 4 or 5 o'clock that afternoon.
Oh, wow.
So I mean, it was a pretty long standoff with that guy. But they got me to the helicopter pad, and the Pampa Fire Department, whenever they came up, they really put their own personal safety aside, and they just ran up not knowing what could potentially be there to happen or whatever. They ignored anything that came up and said, nah, we got to get our brother out. I mean, I know we give firemen a hard time, cops and stuff, man, stinking hose draggers, but we love them. Yeah. We're like that. We're like stepbrothers, I guess. We love each other, but we'll beat the heck out of each other as soon as we can. But no, they really put everything aside, and the people that were there, the paramedics and everything, man, they were spot on. Whenever I got to the helicopter pad, I remember there was a really deep voice, and I guarantee you, it was such a voice that I could pick this guy out of a crowd without ever seeing his face. and he told me everything was going to be all right. Of course, and then my lights went out from there. They went into life-saving mode at that point because everything started swelling up and airway started constricting, started turning blue, all that other good noise. And they got the trach put in, and man, they really saved my life at that point in time.
Sorry, I need a second. What's the next memory that you have?
Waking up at the hospital. I tell you what, I guess I was quite a handful whenever I got to the hospital. I think I woke up. Of course, you know, being a cop, you know, we're a little on the jumpy side anyway. But whenever they woke me up, I guess I reached up and punched somebody. And then
You're probably heavily medicated at this point.
Very, very heavily medicated. So, to the nurse that I hit, I'm sorry. But no, they ended up tying me back down, and I remember that part. And then my wife came in. My mom was there. I had a room full of doctors, nurses, friends, you know.
And how long was it between when you went out and when you came back?
Probably from 4 to 5 hours, maybe. I'm not real sure. I mean, it was a good amount of time, but it wasn't.
We're not talking days or weeks.
Yeah, we're not talking days or weeks or anything like that, thankfully. I think one of the first things that I remember was seeing my wife, and of course I figured out that I couldn't talk because the trach that they put in was big enough to support a horse. I mean, but for some reason I remember kind of tearing up, and I mouthed at her. I told her I was sorry, you know, because she shouldn't have to go through that kind of stuff. She shouldn't have to see her husband laying there with his face blasted off nearly. But you know, she looked at me and she goes, "It's not your fault." And that wasn't the thing right there, man. I knew it wasn't my fault, but you know, one of the next big things is I started asking her where a preacher was at, because I really wanted our pastor there. There was something that hit me, because whenever I'd been going through a divorce and dealing with my dad dying with cancer and everything, this thing really kind of set forth in my life right there. And whenever he got there, she'd given me a pen and a piece of paper, and I could write, sort of, as good as you can in a drug-induced state like that. But I wrote down the verse, Exodus 14:14, and because the chaos that was in the room right then and there at that point in time was just, it was horrendous. I mean, my mom was in there. She had nearly passed out from seeing her baby boy laying there on the cot, and you know, the stress was just so high. But whenever my pastor got there, I asked him to read that to me and to everyone else in the room. And what it says is, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only be quiet." And I mean, instantly, the mood in the room changed. You know, there's not a whole lot that I actually remember about that day, but I remember getting shot. I remember waking up. I remember talking to my wife for a minute, and then I remember that, and then everything else is kind of blurry.
What's the recovery been like?
At best, hell. You know, 18 surgeries.
Wow.
You know, lots of time, you know, especially right after I got home, there was lots of times, man, where I spent time just in my bedroom by myself, you know, just crying, because I didn't know what to think, or I didn't know why, or any of that other good stuff. And thankfully, you know, I had a lot of good lot of good friends that reached out, a lot of other injured officers from across the country that reached out and said, "Hey, brother, you're not alone." All of that has turned into a pretty good thing, I think.
How'd your faith guide you through this?
Oh man, that's the only thing that got me through. I'm just like any other person. You ask the question why, and you ask all those other things. Why'd this have to happen to me? You get mad, you do all those things, man. You even get mad at God a time or two, and but thankfully, I've got a great wife that stayed strong during those times whenever I couldn't, and I had great friends that did that for us and everything. There was a lot of times where what we went through, was there was a lot of borrowed faith there too, because man, in your time of need, God provides those kind of things.
Yeah. You're pretty tough, man. You got back into it. Mm-hmm. You didn't walk away. Not only did you get back in, but you went all in. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about what you're doing now and why.
Well, I'm the chief of police in a small town and not too far away from where I was shot in Fritch, Texas. It's a small community, about 2,500, but we got a large lake, and on the weekends it grows to about 10,000. Why I did it, I think part of it was for me, I needed to get back up on the horse. Had to. I'm a second generation police officer. My dad spent 40 years in this business. I don't know that I've got 40 years in me.
Sure, I could imagine.
But, I think I had to do it for my own personal peace and sanity to make sure that I could go back and do it.
How'd that go over with your wife? And we're going to have her on a separate episode here, but I'm sure that wasn't an easy journey for the two of you.
No, it wasn't, but she was really supportive, whatever I wanted to do. If she was going to support it either way, whether I got back in it or if we turned around and walked away. And either option at that point would have been okay. I mean, because I've done my time. I've proven that I can do the job and everything. But, like I said, for me, walking away wasn't an option. I had to be able to get back and do it.
A lot of the time people will recognize and pay tribute to our emergency responders who have made so many sacrifices, but very often we forget about their significant others that are there for that whole ride. So I'm looking forward to having your better half on
Absolutely.
The next episode. You married up. I married up. We're lucky men.
Amen.
Well, brother, thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing your
thank you,
story. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into it with your wife and with some filming that we're doing later. But congratulations on Citizen of the Year. Thank you
very
guys
much.
for sharing the video. It's going to take you 2 seconds to hit that share button. Do this gentleman a solid. God bless America.